American F-22 Raptors have been permanently rotating through northern Australia for 18 months now, but they're not just visiting, they're transforming the Royal Australian Air Force into something China never anticipated. Every flight, every training mission, every tactical exchange is transferring decades of American air combat expertise into Australian pilots who are being trained to fight and win against numerical superiority. And the most concerning part for Beijing isn't the F-35s Australia already operates or the advanced weapons being deployed, it's the operational integration happening right now that's creating a combined American-Australian Air Force that operates as a single, lethal entity across the Indo-Pacific. This isn't a partnership. This is fusion. Welcome to Doctrine of War, where we analyze the strategic transformations reshaping military power. What's happening to the Royal Australian Air Force right now represents the most significant enhancement of Allied air power since the Cold War, and it's happening faster and more comprehensively than anyone outside classified briefings understands. In the next 3 minutes, you're going to learn exactly what capabilities America is building into Australian air power, why China views this transformation as an existential threat to their Pacific ambitions, and what specific technologies and tactics are turning the RAAF into a force that can contest Chinese air superiority across the entire region. The transformation starts with the most advanced fighter aircraft America has ever exported, the F-35A Lightning II. Australia isn't just buying F-35s, they're receiving the full fifth-generation warfare ecosystem that makes these aircraft devastating. Right now, Australia operates 63 F-35s with plans to eventually field 72 aircraft, making the RAAF one of the largest F-35 fleets outside the United States. But here's what makes this different from just selling advanced fighters. Australian F-35 pilots train at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona alongside American pilots, learning tactics directly from the units that develop them. They're not learning export versions of American doctrine, they're learning the actual classified tactics that the U.S. Air Force uses in combat planning against China. The sensor fusion and networking capabilities of the F-35 create battlefield awareness that fourth-generation Chinese fighters simply cannot match. Each F-35 operates as a flying sensor node, collecting information from its own sophisticated radar and sensors while simultaneously receiving data from other F-35s, AWACS aircraft, ships, satellites, and ground stations. An Australian F-35 operating over the South China Sea isn't just seeing what its own radar detects. It's seeing the complete tactical picture assembled from dozens of platforms across hundreds of miles. This means Australian pilots know where Chinese aircraft are before Chinese pilots know Australian aircraft are even in the area. First look, first shot, first kill, that's the F-35 advantage, and Australia has it. The weapons integration is equally significant. Australian F-35s carry the same advanced missiles that American F-35s use, including the AIM-120D AMRAAM with ranges exceeding 100 miles and the AIM-9X Sidewinder for close-range combat. But more importantly, they're cleared to carry the long-range anti-ship missile and joint strike missile that turn F-35s into naval strike platforms capable of sinking Chinese warships from standoff ranges. A flight of 4 Australian F-35s armed with anti-ship missiles represents more striking power against Chinese naval forces than entire squadrons of older aircraft could deliver, and they can do it while remaining undetected by Chinese air defenses designed to counter fourth-generation threats. If you're starting to see why China's propaganda about American decline and Australian irrelevance doesn't match the military reality being built in the Pacific right now, you're understanding exactly what Doctrine of War exists to reveal. We analyze the real capabilities and partnerships that determine who wins wars, not the comfortable narratives that nations tell themselves. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because what we're about to show you about American-Australian air power integration goes far beyond just selling weapons. This is about creating an allied air force that operates with the kind of seamless coordination that peer adversaries simply cannot replicate. But the F-35 fleet is just one component of transformation. The E-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft that Australia operates alongside the United States creates capabilities that directly threaten Chinese anti-access strategies. These specialized electronic warfare jets can jam Chinese radars, disrupt communications, and create electromagnetic chaos that blinds Chinese air defenses and command systems. Australia operates 11 Growlers, a small number but significant because these aircraft give Australia offensive electronic warfare capability that very few nations possess. And critically, Australian Growlers are fully interoperable with American Growlers, meaning they can operate in coordinated electronic attack packages that overwhelm Chinese defenses through combined jamming that neither country could achieve alone. The E-7A Wedgetail Airborne Early Warning and Control Aircraft represents another critical capability where American investment and partnership has created Australian capability far exceeding what the nation's size would suggest. The Wedgetail uses advanced electronically scanned array radar that can track hundreds of targets simultaneously across enormous areas. These aircraft serve as flying command posts that coordinate air operations, direct fighters to targets, and provide the situational awareness necessary for modern air combat. And here's what makes this strategically significant. The United States is so impressed with Australian Wedgetail capabilities that the US Air Force is buying the same aircraft to replace its aging AWACS fleet. This isn't America selling technology to Australia. This is America adopting Australian technology because it's superior to existing American systems, creating a relationship where capability flows in both directions. Building the infrastructure, bases, training, and integration. The physical infrastructure being built across northern Australia reveals the scope of American commitment to making Australian air power a dominant regional force. Tindal Air Base, located in Australia's Northern Territory roughly 300 kilometers south of Darwin, is being transformed into one of the most capable military air bases in the Indo-Pacific. The United States is investing billions of dollars to expand Tindal's fuel storage, ammunition bunkers, maintenance facilities, and aircraft parking to support sustained operations by large numbers of combat aircraft. This isn't just upgrading an Australian base. This is creating infrastructure that allows American B-52 bombers, fighters, tankers, and support aircraft to operate from Australian territory as if it were American sovereign territory. The runway extensions and hardening at Tindal and other northern bases create capacity to launch strike operations that can reach deep into Southeast Asia, the South China Sea, and even approaching Chinese coastal waters. From Tindal, combat aircraft can strike targets throughout Indonesia, reach into the Malacca Straits where Chinese oil imports transit, and threaten Chinese naval forces operating in contested waters. The strategic geography is unambiguous. Australia's northern bases put American and Australian air power at the southern anchor of the first island chain, creating a second front that Chinese military planning must account for in any Taiwan or South China Sea scenario. But infrastructure is only valuable if you have trained personnel who can use it effectively. This is where American investment in Australian training and education is creating lasting advantages. Australian pilots now routinely participate in red flag exercises in Nevada and Alaska, where they practice large force combat scenarios against adversary tactics that replicate Chinese doctrine and capabilities. These aren't symbolic exercises where allies show up for diplomatic purposes. These are realistic combat training where Australian pilots fly against aggressor squadrons that use Chinese tactics, face simulated Chinese air defenses, and learn how to survive and win in exactly the kind of high-intensity combat that war with China would produce. The maintenance and logistics integration deserves particular attention because sustainment determines whether forces can actually fight or just exist on paper. Australian F-35s use the same parts, tools, and maintenance procedures as American F-35s, which means American supply chains can support Australian aircraft and vice versa. In wartime, this creates resilience where battle damage, attrition, or logistics disruption doesn't ground aircraft because they can't get parts. Australian and American F-35 fleets become mutually supporting rather than independent systems that fail separately. This logistics interoperability extends beyond F-35s to include refueling aircraft, munitions compatibility, and shared maintenance facilities that allow both nations' aircraft to operate from each other's bases without requiring separate, duplicative support infrastructures. The intelligence sharing and mission planning integration creates the seamless operational cooperation that distinguishes genuine military integration from looser alliances. Australian and American intelligence services share information at levels normally reserved for the closest allies, providing Australian planners with access to American satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and threat assessments that inform targeting, route planning, and tactical decisions. When Australian pilots plan missions, they're working with the same intelligence that American pilots use, seeing the same threat picture, and coordinating strikes as part of integrated packages rather than conducting separate operations that just happen to occur simultaneously. The tactical data links that connect Australian and American aircraft in flight create real-time coordination that maximizes effectiveness of combined operations. Link 16 and newer data link systems allow aircraft to share targeting information, coordinate missile engagements, and conduct tactical maneuvers as if they were a single force rather than separate national contingents operating under common command. An Australian F-35 can detect a Chinese aircraft, transmit that information to an American F-15 or F-22, which then launches missiles using Australian targeting data while the Australian aircraft remains undetected. This kind of sensor-shooter separation, where detection and engagement are performed by different platforms, creates tactical advantages that adversaries operating nationally segregated forces cannot replicate. The training of Australian ground crews, intelligence officers, mission planners and command staff at American institutions creates shared operational culture and common procedures that make integration natural rather than forced. When Australian officers attend U.S. Air Force weapons schools and staff colleges, they're not just learning American doctrine, they're building relationships with American counterparts who they'll work with in future operations, establishing trust and mutual understanding that can't be created through formal treaties or strategic dialogues. These personal and professional relationships mean that when a crisis erupts, Australian and American officers already know how each other thinks, already trust each other's judgment, and already have established working relationships that allow rapid coordination without the friction that typically characterizes coalition operations. Advanced capabilities and future systems. The munitions that America is providing to Australia represent capabilities that fundamentally alter what Australian air power can threaten. The long-range anti-ship missile gives Australian F-35s and F divided by a -18F Super Hornets the ability to sink Chinese warships from distances exceeding 200 miles while remaining outside the engagement range of most Chinese air defense systems. These aren't just anti-ship missiles. These are weapons specifically designed to defeat the air defenses that protect Chinese carriers, destroyers, and amphibious ships, using stealth characteristics and terminal maneuvers that make interception extremely difficult. A squadron of Australian aircraft armed with these missiles represents a lethal threat to Chinese naval forces that must be defended against, tying down Chinese air defenses and combat air patrol assets that would otherwise be available for offensive operations. The Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range (JSSMR) provides Australian forces with land attack capability at ranges approaching 600 miles. These stealthy cruise missiles can strike Chinese air bases, radar sites, command posts, and logistics nodes from distances where launching aircraft remain relatively safe from Chinese air defenses. The strategic implications are profound. Australia can threaten Chinese military infrastructure across the South China Sea and into southern China itself without exposing pilots to the kind of intense air defense environment that has historically protected Chinese territory from air attack. The deterrent effect of these weapons cannot be overstated. Chinese military planners must account for the possibility that their bases, ports, and command facilities could be struck by Australian forces, creating defensive requirements that dilute the offensive power available for operations against Taiwan or other regional targets. The air-to-air refueling capability that Australia is expanding with new KC-30A tanker aircraft extends the combat radius of Australian fighters far beyond what their internal fuel allows. These tankers, built on the Airbus A330 platform, can refuel multiple fighters simultaneously while carrying enough fuel to support sustained operations over vast Pacific distances. The operational significance is that Australian F-35s or Super Hornets operating from northern Australia with tanker support can reach well into Southeast Asia, patrol over the South China Sea for extended periods, or conduct strike missions against distant targets before returning safely to base. Without tankers, fighters are limited to relatively short-range operations. With tankers, those same fighters become strategic assets that can operate across the entire region. The integration with American space-based systems provides Australian forces with targeting quality intelligence and communication capabilities that would be impossible for Australia to develop independently. American military satellites provide real-time imagery, electronic intelligence, and secure communications that Australian forces rely on for everything from mission planning to in-flight updates on enemy positions. This dependency is also a strength, because Australian forces are integrated into American space architecture. Disrupting Australian capabilities requires attacking American space assets, which represents an escalation that China must carefully consider. Australia essentially gets access to the most sophisticated space-based military capabilities in the world without bearing the full cost of developing and maintaining those systems. The cyber and electromagnetic warfare capabilities being developed through American-Australian cooperation create offensive and defensive options in domains that are increasingly decisive in modern combat. Australian Defence Force Cyber Command works closely with US Cyber Command, sharing tools, techniques, and intelligence about Chinese cyber capabilities and vulnerabilities. This cooperation means Australian forces can conduct cyber operations against Chinese targets, disrupting command and control, corrupting data, creating confusion, while also defending against Chinese cyber attacks with support from American defensive capabilities. The electromagnetic warfare dimension includes not just the EA-18G Growlers but also ground-based electronic warfare systems, cyber-electromagnetic integration, and the ability to operate effectively even when Chinese forces attempt to jam communications or spoof GPS signals. The Loyal Wingman unmanned aircraft program represents the next frontier where American technology and Australian innovation are creating capabilities that could fundamentally change air combat. Australia is developing the MQ-28 Ghost Bat unmanned combat aircraft through Boeing Australia, designed to operate alongside manned fighters as affordable, expendable platforms that can conduct reconnaissance, electronic warfare, or even strike missions while keeping human pilots out of danger. The concept is that an Australian F-35 pilot could control several Ghost Bats, sending them ahead to detect threats, suppress air defenses, or deliver weapons while the manned F-35 remains at safer distances directing operations. If this program succeeds, and American interests suggest it's promising, Australia will have created a force multiplication capability that extends the effectiveness of its relatively small fighter fleet by pairing each manned aircraft with multiple unmanned systems. The pilot training pipeline that America has helped Australia establish ensures that quality doesn't suffer as quantity increases. Training fighter pilots is extraordinarily expensive and time-consuming, but Australia has invested in simulators, training aircraft, and instructor development that creates pilots who meet the same standards as American fighter pilots. The lead-in fighter training program uses advanced jet trainers that replicate many characteristics of combat aircraft, allowing students to develop tactical skills before transitioning to expensive frontline fighters. And the integration of Australian student pilots into American training programs provides access to American expertise and facilities that would be prohibitively expensive to replicate independently. The strategic messaging that comes from visible American-Australian air integration serves deterrent purposes that complement the actual military capabilities. When Chinese military intelligence observes American B-52s operating from Australian bases, American and Australian fighters conducting joint exercises, and American investment in Australian infrastructure, the message is unmistakable. Australian air power is not separate from American air power but is instead a component of integrated Allied air capability that China would face in any Pacific conflict. This integration creates uncertainty for Chinese planners who cannot simply calculate Australian capabilities in isolation but must instead assume that Australian and American forces would operate as a unified whole with combined capabilities exceeding what either nation could achieve independently. That's today's analysis of the Doctrine of War. If this examination of how America is transforming Australian air power into a dominant regional force gave you a new understanding of alliance politics and capability building in the Indo-Pacific, let us know in the comments. Do you think Australian air power can genuinely contest Chinese air superiority? What capabilities matter most in determining air combat outcomes? And if you want more analysis of the weapons, partnerships, and strategies shaping great power competition, subscribe and turn on notifications. We're covering the military transformations that will determine who controls the Pacific for the next generation. The American-Australian air power integration isn't just about preparing for potential conflict with China. It's about creating deterrence so robust that China calculates aggression in the Pacific would face opposition so capable and so costly that attempting it becomes irrational. Every F-35 Australia operates, every American bomber that rotates through Tindal, every joint exercise that practices strike operations, sends a message to Beijing that the Pacific isn't becoming a Chinese lake no matter how large the PLA Air Force grows. And for Australia, this American partnership provides security guarantees and military capabilities that would be impossible to achieve independently, turning a middle power into a genuinely consequential military force that must be accounted for in any Chinese strategic calculation. Until next time, stay strategic.